بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, respected ulama and huffaz, respected youth, honorable viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. We begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we send salutations on our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My dear brothers and sisters, respected viewers and listeners, today we are going to discuss a very important topic. And this topic is not only an Islamic right, but it is also a human right, and it is an area that needs to be addressed to secure the moral and Islamic progression of society and this community in particular. My dear brothers and sisters, today we will be exploring the right to living in a safe and protected environment, the right of safety. And in particular, my dear brothers and sisters, we are looking at the right or the rights of women and children in that they should be protected. So we are having a special Jumu'ah program today. In the context of today's Jumu'ah, I think firstly is acknowledging the Palestinian massacre, genocide. May Allah free Palestine. Seeing this violence occurring over and over, and of course the Muslims are at the receiving end of this. It is important that we as Muslims reflect on the notion of safety of people and what is Islam's position regarding this. And then secondly, in South Africa, we are on the eve of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. In the next few days, throughout South Africa, various organizations will be promoting that there must be this awareness of gender-based violence. And so as a religious community, as a Muslim community, we must be leading the conversation regarding this. So in the context of Muslim community governance, we find as the imams of masajid and sort of heads of Muslim communities that the issues of violence and abuse prevail way too much. It occurs in many homes and marriages. and it occurs frequently and we don't talk about it sufficiently. So today's khutbah will occur also against the backdrop of research that had been conducted in our community, in the Muslim community. And I will acknowledge a social development lecturer and community worker, Dr. Razia Nordin, has done research into how some Muslim women in the Muslim community of the city face violence and abuse. And there's an urgent need to have a public campaign within our community to address this issue, to educate all of us so that we can continue to adhere to the Islamic teachings of family and societal life. So other than this issue being an important social issue, it is also an important aspect of Islamic law, of the Sharia, of what Allah expects from me and from you. That we build and we contribute to a society that adheres to Islamic principles. In the emphatic declaration of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, listen to the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he declared, Allahumma inni uharriju haqqa al-da'ifain, al-yatim wal-mar'ah. O Allah, I declare inviolable the rights of the weak, the orphan and the woman. So the Sharia is explicit in how women and the young must be protected. And Allah has designated the role of men quite clearly in this regard, in which Allah declares, Ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa, that men are the protectors of their wives. They are protectors of women. That men must accept the amana, the trust of safeguarding women and children. So my dear brothers and sisters, our guest speaker that will be contributing to the pre-khutbah talk today is Advocate Mujaahid Sandan. And he presented, my dear brothers and sisters, an absolutely eye-opening workshop a few weeks ago to the imams and the ulama of the city that highlighted the important legal considerations that as imams we need to be aware of as a functional Muslim community in a South African legal context. And the ulama that attended that workshop afterwards agreed unanimously that this information must enter the Muslim community. Muslims need to be aware of this. And so we present today's Jumu'ah in light of upholding the legacy of Muslims being at the forefront of protecting the rights of others, protecting the rights of women and children. So my dear brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah, we are honored to welcome Advocate Muhammad Mujaahid Sandan, a senior state advocate in the National Prosecuting Authority. He has over 20 years of service in law. He's also an active contributor in leadership of our Muslim community by serving as the chairperson of the Al-Ansar Trust and the current chairperson of the Eastern Cape Muslim Broadcasting Association. Advocate Sandan is a specialist in criminal law and will be talking to us today within a particular context about the rights afforded to victims of gender-based violence and the rights afforded to children from a South African legal perspective. After Advocate Sandan has addressed us, I will provide an Islamic perspective on the matter, inshallah. We welcome Advocate Sandan. Jazakallah khairan.
Respected ulama, our elders, our mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, and our beloved youth, I greet you with a cherished greeting of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, I want to say shukran to the Imam of this masjid, Sheikh Mukhtar, and the committee of the trust for allowing me this wonderful opportunity. I'm first and foremost humbled by the opportunity, and I hope to share information on this very serious topic. The scourge of gender-based violence is an abuse of women and children by nature of gender. But gender-based violence and the abuse of children is not immune to religion, race, creed, or color. It stands in front of the door of all of us. Now, what is gender-based violence is one of the questions we must ask. And in what forms does gender-based violence occur? It occurs in most circumstances in the domestic relationship between parties. And that falls under the Domestic Violence Act. Now, you must forgive me, I'm not going to bore you with sections and that. I think it's just going to take too much time. I'm just going to keep it as plain and simple as possible so everybody can follow, inshallah. You're welcome to go check up and check me on it if it's incorrect. And we're going to concentrate on what the definition of a domestic relationship is and the legal framework, the South African legal framework put in place to address the social evil of gender-based violence and domestic violence. The legal and moral obligation we all have in curbing out this crime against women and children, and the rights afforded to the victims of domestic violence and gender-based violence. And I share with you this information today under the banner of the National Prosecuting Authority, under the innovation program that's been brought forward, where we are tasked in going out into our communities and sharing and enlightening and making our communities aware of how the South African law is developing, how the South African law is making progress in terms of the rights of the citizens of the country. And this basic information on gender-based violence comes about to the certain amendments that had taken place in terms of the Domestic Violence Act to curb gender-based violence. Now, gender-based violence in itself can be described as a harmful act that is committed and targets the opposite gender, often with socially ascribed power, dynamic which consists between the opposite genders, often makes the females or the children the victims, and they are the vulnerable ones due to the biological and social economic imbalance between the opposite genders. Come on. The act may be physical, sexual, that of mental suffering, a threat, or be in the form of mental harm or coercion in the form of deprivation of liberty. Now, in discussing the gender-based violence, there's four main groups that branches off into different sections to identify the gender-based violence. The first one is that of sexual violence, physical violence, emotional violence, and economical violence. I touched very briefly on the four branches that I've mentioned. In sexual violence, we can have the form of sexual assault, the form of rape, sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, and trafficking. Now, when I say trafficking, I'm not referring to the Road Traffic Act. Totally not. I want to give you an example to try and explain it. We don't have to go far. If we go into the central area, we find that, unfortunately, and with all due respect, I mentioned it, that we have prostitution. Let me explain to you cases how this trafficking takes place and the exploitation and the sexual violence carries on. The man meets the lady, he enters into a love relationship with her, under the guise of a love relationship, I would say, and he makes her believe, well, he's in love with her. They carry on courting each other. He ensures that they both get hooked onto drugs and drug abuse, and they're totally hooked on it. And then he actually ends up saying, well, tonight, for us to carry on with what we're doing, you're going to work the streets of Central. I love you so much. I expect you to do this for me. This is the only way we're going to survive. Only for her to find out, if not a day later or the second day later, or when she meets somebody else doing the same as her on the street, no, but that guy is also my boyfriend. What is he actually doing? He's trafficking the lady. And for trafficking, which is part of domestic violence and gender-based violence, the only thing you need to look out for is a transaction. Wherever there's a transaction for and or the transfer of the person and or for any favors from the person, that is the trafficking of the person. The physical violence speaks for itself. It might start off with a light slap, it might start off with a kick, and it can escalate. I've seen it escalating to where the person is actually being killed. I will give you a few examples in future. Now, emotional violence might seem strange, but it happens. And the accused or the perpetrators of gender-based violence and domestic violence are the best as emotional and psychological manipulation. To the extent where they make the victim of it feel that you done something wrong. I give you an example, and I try to place it with all due respect in our environment as Muslims. Second day of Ramadan, the soup comes to the table and the soup hasn't got enough salt. Jy's kwaad, lank gepoasa. The soup is hot, buka time, agitated, the children are making a noise at the buka table. Taste the soup, just broke your fast. And for example, you tell the wife, example, Zenit, kom sy het genoeg soppie. Ek hoor nog sout in die soppie. And there the soup flies towards Zenit. There are parts of this that all just fit into each other. This is done in front of the children. Carry on, you ask maaf, and you continue in that sense. Come after Ramadan, it now progresses, something else goes wrong, it's a smack, then a kick, and a further assault, all in front of the children. But note, all in the confines of your home. Note, in the confines of the place where the woman and children should feel safe and feel protected by us as the men. I say supposed to. I will elaborate further. Economical violence. It sounds strange to put it to, how can economics be violence? But what we're trying to say is the abuse of it. If it's a stay-at-home mother, withholding funds from the mother, restricting funds from the woman, not providing with what she needs. It's an abuse. Yes, we all agree that we have tough times that we sit upon in our country, and may Allah make it easy for us all, inshallah. But to deliberately and intentionally withhold funds in the sense of hurting the family or the woman is part of gender-based violence. Now, Domestic Violence Acts describes, or the Domestic Violence Act as amended, describes the serious social evil as follows. The act was enacted initially to protect the victims of domestic violence, who are often the most vulnerable members of our society, women and children. Due to the increase and the scourge that has been mentioned by Sheikh, violence, legislature, our government has decided, no, this is not right. So let me just give you a short background to explain to you why government has now made amendments to the act itself. Husband hits wife with a fist, they go to court and they appear in court. There's no protection order that she seeked before, and the husband appears, 500 rand bail. She knows if he doesn't come home, he's not going to go to work, there's going to be no money. Do we see where the economic abuse comes in? She's dependent on him, Ma, and the children are dependent on him. The case that appears in front of the prosecutor has nothing special to it. There's no protection order, so you cannot put a charge created by statute for the contravention of the protection order. You've got a normal and assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm charge. Once the trial starts and the case speaks, and if the man is convicted, the fact that he had beaten his wife aggravates the sentence. Government said no. That's too late a stage. What are we essentially doing? Government question themselves. We are sending that victim of domestic violence directly back into that environment where she has been abused, where she has been assaulted, and that can never be right. And therefore, with the scourge of domestic violence, government has decided that we must make amendments. So this is a warning with all due respect to, if you're thinking about it, with all due respect, if you are doing it, this is the difference that now comes along. And government decided that the amendments should be made to be able to address the plight that the country is facing. And the amendments under the Domestic Violence Act 14 of 2021 were intended to broaden the scope of legislation and empower our courts to ensure that the scourge does not continue. I pause at that juncture to just explain to you what a domestic relationship is defined as, because we always put it and confine it to a husband and wife situation, which is not the case. I want you to note that this is the definition as per the South African law, and not my definition, and or with all due respect as a Muslim, not supported, but this is what the definition is. A domestic relationship means that the complainant in the case and or the accused are in one of the following relationships, and they lived and or interacted in one of the following circumstances. They are or they were married to each other, including marriage recognized under any law, custom, or religion. So what did government intend there? We know the whole saga with the Muslim Marriages Act and the enacting of it, and it's still at a standstill. So if you thought that the law says it's a husband and wife that are married, and you would think that it's only under South African law, which means a civil marriage, or as we would say, is op die hof getroud. And you say, nee, ek kan haar maar slaan, Sheikh het ons getrou. No ways. Not. The law has gone as far as to say custom or religion. So you don't have that as a defense. It's out the window. They, and this is the part I was referring to, irrespective whether they are of the same sex, live together in a relationship in the nature of a marriage, although they were not married. So essentially, if you were cohabitating, this you would also fall under the definition of a domestic relationship. That they are the parents of a child or persons who have or had parental responsibilities of the child, whether or not at the same time. So what does they mean here? They mean here that the child can be staying with the father for a week, the child can be staying with the mother for the week. They could have been cohabitating before that, and or they could have been divorced. And I give you an example. Mujaahid arrives late. He is supposed to pick the children up at 5 o'clock. He picks the children up on a Saturday at 5 o'clock. He arrives 8 o'clock on that night. Zenith comes out and she's screaming and shouting with all due respect. And now it can be the other way around, abuse on the husband as well, or on the man or the male, to keep it general. She's very upset. She was supposed to go for whatever she needed to be at, and she couldn't be there. She missed this appointment out. She's very upset. As she comes out, she picks up part of the paving and she throws the windscreen broken. Children are waiting to see their father. So the fact that the children are shared by you, that windscreen is broken. If Mujaahid then decides to leave and open a case under the new act, on Sunday night, Zenith is picked up and she has to appear in court on Monday. Keep that example in mind when I come to the amendments of the act. This all happened in front of the children. That they are family members or related by consanguinity, blood relationship, affinity, and or by adoption. That they were in an engagement, courting, customary relationship, including an actual perceived romantic, intimate, or sexual relationship of any duration of time. They share or recently shared the same residence. This is all described as what a domestic relationship is. Now, the amendments that have been brought in by our legislature, I deal with at this stage. Under the amendments, the powers that were traditionally known as prosecutorial bail. Remember, I said he's now just beat the wife with a fist. She makes a case. he's arrested. He's laying at Calvindale police station. Alhamdulillah, he's got the funds. He contacts a private attorney. The private attorney phones the prosecutor. Section 59 of the Criminal Procedure Act says certain offences, the prosecutor can fix bail after hours for the person incarcerated. Remember, no protection order. These amendments are not in place. What the prosecutor sees, yes, husband and wife situation, but there's no protection order. It's the first time he's been arrested. It's the first time it's happened. Without knowing what's the history in the four walls of the home. And he fixed bail in the amount of 500 rand. The 500 rand is paid. It went very quick. The 500 rand is paid and he's gone. Goes back home. After he's gone back home, what happens then? It can happen again. The new law says the prosecutor can't do that anymore where there's a domestic violence relationship or domestic relationship between the parties. Therefore, the party who laid the complaint, if it is the woman, is protected in that circumstances. My time is now very short. I didn't know it was going to go so quick, Sheikh. But in any event, I'm going to try and go through it as quick as possible. What happens is, if he appears in court on Monday, before an example, the magistrate would say, right, you're going to go stay by a different address, by your sister. You can't go to that house, and so forth and so forth. He would make that order. Now the amendments to the Act says that the court is obliged to have an inquiry, issue a protection order immediately, and ensure that the woman or the complainant is brought to court and his or her concerns must be listened to. That court must then immediately issue an interim protection order to protect the victim of the domestic relationship in the domestic violence in itself. So these are the forms of legislation that is being put into place. If that inquiry is going to be held and there's issues about your bail as the accused not being able to go back to the same house and that, you are looking at facing at least 7 days of incarceration at the Correctional Services Facility, St. Albans, that we have in our district, and not at the police station this time. So that the magistrate can have that inquiry and consider your bail in the same time. So we must heed the actions at the time. I just want to touch on children and our duties for children in regard to children. There's also been an amendment to the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act 36 of 2007. I can't even remember these things so much. But be that as it may, the section essentially changes what the law used to be before. Before, it said that teachers, police officers, social workers, where any minor child reports a form of abuse, whether sexual in nature or physical abuse, they were obliged or placed under duty to report it. And the legislature said that this is not enough. It's too confound to a certain area of people. I just want to read the section to you and then explain very shortly. It says, now, not anymore teacher or a social worker or parent or person in special duty. It now reads, a person who has knowledge or reasonable belief or suspicion that a sexual offense has been committed against a person who is vulnerable as defined in section 40 must report such knowledge, reasonable belief or suspicion immediately to a police official. A person who fails to report such knowledge or reasonable belief or suspicion as contemplated in section 1 is guilty of an offense and can be sentenced to imprisonment of not exceeding 5 years or a fine or both. A person who in good faith makes such a report or makes such a report and has reasonable belief of such a suspicion shall not be liable to any civil or criminal proceedings by reason of making such a report. So what does it mean essentially? The Act uses big words and it continues the person and whatever. It means that all of us sitting here, not now only the madrasa teacher, not only the sheikh, not only the committee is placed under the duty, but all of us who are adults. I give you an example. If Abdul Wahid and Yusuf are brothers, Abdul Wahid's got a 9-year-old girl, Suraya. But Uncle Yusuf takes them home in the afternoon, his children and Suraya. This afternoon, he has to drop his children first, and he's taking Suraya to be dropped off at madrasa. Suraya then says, Uncle Yusuf, can I tell you something? She said, yes, carry on. It's my daughter's child. Tell me what you want to say. She says, you know, my father touches me there, pointing between her legs. The brother, under this act, under this section, is obliged to report it to the police. You don't have an option. It doesn't say may. The section is directory. It says shall. You must report it. And this duty falls upon all of us, as difficult as it may be. And now we're going to sit in our environments and we're going to sit with, yes, my broer, what am I going to do? The Act says and warns us, if Suraya becomes 10, 11, 12, or 13, and she actually musters up the courage to say to somebody else, this is what my father done to me since I am 9 years old. She says in a police statement, I told my uncle Yusuf when I was 9 years old about it. South African police services and the NPA will have to follow up, and Uncle Yusuf will have to face the consequences for not making the report and end up being the accused. Remember, you've got nothing to be scared of. If you read the section below, all you need to have is to act in good faith. All you need to have is the reasonable belief, and you cannot face criminal and or civil liability. I want to didn't get to half of what I wanted to say. Inshallah, I'll be invited back to cover the topic in much depth. Just to give you an example, 2004, 2005, a young prosecutor in New Brighton courts. And this is why I want to urge women and children, everybody, to break the silence. Even you as a male, if you can hear somebody's being beaten next door, be besig. Go and knock on the door. See who's being hurt, even more so if it's a Muslim family next door. It is our duty, I feel. It's our moral duty to do it. Go and find out what's happening. I want to explain to you at 2004, 2005, young prosecutor in New Brighton. The wife was beaten to a pulp. The husband is taking her to hospital at the time. She dares but open her mouth, and in a weak state, he opens the passenger door and he flings her out of the car. No protection order, just an attempted murder case. On the morning of the consultation, I meet with her and I want to consult with her before she goes into trial. Go through the statement and everything, and at the end of the consultation, she says, sorry, sir, but I don't want to continue with the case. I say, you spent so much time in hospital. You were so badly hurt. The manipulation, the psychological abuse, the economic abuse, she's been through everything already. When I would be like, you know what her words are to me? No, sir, he was just hitting the loving. It sounds strange, but it's sad. It is very, very sad when the victims make themselves believe that they are the wrong ones. We must stand up as a community. We must stand up for the rights for women and children. And we must speak out against it. Break the silence. And inshallah, Allah will give us the guidance to do so, inshallah. I say shukran to all of you for granting me the opportunity. Shukran kathiran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We say Jazakallah khairan to Advocate Sandan, and in the 2 minutes that I have available, mashallah, Sheikh Sandan took over. I just want to mention one hadith of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to reinforce the position that Islam takes regarding the abuse, the concept of violence. When Aisha radiallahu anha was asked about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding, is he a violent man? If you want to find out something, you must ask the wife of someone usually. Eh? We make dua, wives are quiet. But Aisha radiallahu anha was asked, and she responded with the following words: ما ضرب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بيده شيئا قط. She says, radiallahu anha, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam never hit anything with his hand. إلا أن يجاهد في سبيل الله. The only time he was physically violent or physical was when he was in jihad. And then she continues, ولا ضرب خادما. And he never hit a servant. ولا امرأة. And he never hit a woman. So this is a very fundamental and important teaching for the Muslim Ummah. Because our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam confirmed خيركم خيركم لأهله. That the best of you are those who treat their family the best. And the Prophet said sallallahu alayhi wasallam, وأنا خيركم لأهله. And I am the best of those who treat my of the families the best. So my dear brothers and sisters, we close with the teaching of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam that the concept of abuse and violence is not one that should occur in the Muslim community. It shouldn't. It sadly does, but it should not occur. Standing from this position, as advocate went through cases, the sad reality is I could sit there and I call out names for every scenario. That is sad as an imam of a community. Listening to law and I can identify so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so in a single year in our community. So we must call it out from this position and we remind ourselves that the nature of Islam is that there must be gentleness and kindness in our dealings. As Allah describes us, ruhama bainakum, that you must be merciful to one another. And I'll close with this beautiful teaching of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ما كان الرفق في شيء إلا زانه ولا نزع من شيء إلا شانه. That when you find gentleness in something, it beautifies it. And the minute you remove gentleness, that harshness that prevails will disfigure it. So my dear brothers and sisters, a very strong reminder to myself and to everyone that the responsibility, other than the South African legal responsibility, the responsibility from Allah is that we do not allow such behavior in our homes and in our community. And we must ask Allah to assist us and guide us to prevent violence from perpetuating. As I engaged with the researcher, I'll close with this point. The researcher that I mentioned in introduction that has been engaging with Muslims in our community in terms of how they are facing abuse and how they are facing violence. The researcher highlighted one important point that must be communicated to the community is that if you engage in these acts in front of children, you contribute to the cycle of that violence. That when children see mommy and daddy screaming, fighting, hitting each other, that child will have psychological trauma. That child will not perform appropriately in madrasa and school. And worst case, that child continues the violence when that child is married because they accepted it to be normal. And when I read this report from the researcher, I thought, Ya Allah, all the cases where there's been violence in homes and the perpetrator says, you know what, I think I'm doing this because maybe mommy did this. Or I'm doing this because daddy did this. So may Allah guide us to the akhlaq of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We say Jazakallah khairan to Advocate Sandan for sharing beautiful words and encouraging words to ensure that the Muslims are not at the forefront of this, and we are the ones who ensure that there's beauty. You know, as Allah wishes for every couple, that is recited to every person getting married, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Allah wishes for a couple that you must have love and mercy in your relationship and in your home. May Allah grant that to all of us. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. My dear brothers and sisters, very quickly, the announcements. Inshallah, there's a beautiful program taking place today here at Majd Taqwa, starting at 5:30 p.m. It is around the Islamic world in 80 minutes. It will be presented by Maulana Ibrahim Musa and Maulana Yusuf Bimith, inshallah, in the seminar hall. Facilities for males and females will be available. Then, inshallah, on Sunday at Tramways at 3 p.m., Dr. Mads Gilbert, a humanitarian and activist, a volunteer at Shifa Hospital in Gaza, is traveling to our city and will be addressing the community, inshallah, on Sunday, tramways at 3 p.m., inshallah. Then we remind you that the madrasa and part-time hifz enrollment is open for next year. And then the Islamic spiritual retreat registration is still open. Please access info online. And then also we just confirm that at Masjid Taqwa, the online booking system for the facilities has been opened in the week. And for any families that do want to book the coffee shop area and so forth, you may do so online, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله، الحمد لله الولي الحميد الفعال لما يريد وهو ذو العرش المجيد، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله البشير النذير والسراج المنير، صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، وعلى أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين، وعلى أصحابه غر الميامين، وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فاتقوا الله وأصلحوا ذات بينكم. أيها الإخوة المسلمون، المجتمع المسلم مجتمع رحمة ومودة ومحبة وشفقة، رحماء بينهم، وعلى هذا المبدأ يقوم الدين وتبنى الحضارات. والحضارة الحقيقية هي حضارة الأخلاق والسلوك والقيم. ولكن عباد الله، هناك سلوك يخلو من الرحمة والشفقة ومن معاني الإنسانية. هذا السلوك الخاطئ أيها الإخوة بدأ يزيد وينتشر داخل أسرنا ومجتمعاتنا، إنه العنف الأسري. هذا السلوك الغريب الذي يخالف كل القيم والأخلاق. العنف شر كله والرفق خير كله، كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام: ما كان الرفق في شيء إلا زانه، ولا نزع من شيء إلا شانه. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: اللهم إني أحرج حق الضعيفين اليتيم والمرأة. وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت: ما ضرب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بيده شيئا قط إلا أن يجاهد في سبيل الله، ولا ضرب خادما ولا امرأة. عباد الله، قال الله تعالى: الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. ويقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: خيركم خيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهله. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولوالدي ولوالديكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله، الحمد لله الذي تقدست أسماؤه وسمت آلاؤه ومجدت رسله وأنبياؤه. نحمده تعالى على نعمة الإيمان، ونشكره على ما تفضل من الإحسان وما أولان من الامتنان. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله الواحد بلا أدد، الدام بلا أمد، شهادة إيمان وإيقان وقبول وإذعان. ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله سيد ولد عدنان. أما بعد، فإن الله اختار لكم الدين فلا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون وبينكم معالمه فاتقوا الله واعبدوه واتكلوا عليه وأطيعوه والله يجزي المحسنين. واعلموا أن المولى الكريم خص نبيه بالصلاة والتسليم فقال ولم يزل قائلا عليما وآمرا حكيما إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم صلاة دائمة كاملة إلى يوم الدين وعلى آله الأطهار وصحبه الأبرار ما تقلبت الشموس والأقمار وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم المآب. اللهم إز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم إز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم إز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم ثبت علينا الإيمان وارحمنا بالقرآن واجعلنا في عز وأمان. اللهم احفظ مسجد الأقصى اللهم احفظ مسجد الأقصى اللهم احفظ مسجد الأقصى. اللهم انصر المسلمين في فلسطين اللهم انصر المسلمين في غزة اللهم انصر المسلمين في كل مكان. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات أرحم الراحمين. عباد الله اذكروا العظيم يذكركم واشكروه على نعم يزدكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة. We can just straighten the sufuf very quickly, inshallah. There are people at the door. Those at the door, just move in this direction, inshallah, towards your left. Inshallah, very quickly. Jazakum khairan. There's still space here on this side, inshallah. Those entering very quickly on this side. Your left, inshallah, your left. Those entering at the door. Jazakum khairan.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فإذوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغون فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا وإن خفتم شقاق بينهما فابعثوا حكما من أهله وحكما من أهلها إن يريدا إصلاحا يوفق الله بينهما إن الله كان عليما خبيرا الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أستغفر الله العظيم التواب الرحيم الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ونتوب إليك ونسألك توبة ومغفرة وهداية إنه هو التواب الرحيم. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام، تباركت ربنا وتعاليت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم فدعوناك يا رب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم إنا نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في الدين والدنيا والآخرة، والفوز بالجنة والنجاة من النار. يا نور النور، يا عالم ما في الصدور، أخرجنا يا الله يا الله من الظلمات إلى النور. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. اللهم انصرنا وانصر الإسلام والمسلمين والمجاهدين في فلسطين وفي كل مكان، ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين. آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك خير ما سألك منه نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك منه نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. اللهم إنا نسألك خيرا من كل عاجله وعاجله، ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم، ونعوذ بك من شر كل عاجله وعاجله، ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار، وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار. يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم عليه والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي، يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم بفضلك دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها السلام، وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله